about 2 months ago, I went to my favorite coffee shop in a shopping centre, because we love shopping centres in the UK. And when I say it was my favourite coffee shop, it's British coffee, so it's sort of fake coffee, right? And it's also Costa, which is a brand in the UK, which is owned by McDonald's. So it's really just dreadful coffee. Anyway, I couldn't get a cup of coffee because it was shut. And it was shut. There was a sign on the window, and it says, "We're sorry, we're closed today. The Merry Chef isn't working." The Merry Chef isn't working. I've actually worked in hospitality before when I was a student, and actually I do know what a Merry Chef is. But do you? Show of hands, who knows what a Merry Chef is? No one. Of course you don't. Why would you know what a Merry Chef is? But the coffee shop is closed. You can't get it because what is the Merry Chef? Is it the person that makes the paninis and they are merry because they are just happy, but they're sick today? Or the Merry Chef isn't working. He got drunk and now he can't do the No one knows what the Merry Chef isn't working means. But if you go onto the internet, you can find out, and that's what I did. So here you go. If you want to know what the Merry Chef is, I will just read it out to you, if my clicker works, which it doesn't. Come on, clicker. They never work, do they? Oh, it's probably because I need to click on the presentation as well, because, you know, why make things easy? The Merry Chef icon range is delicious hot food on demand. Merry Chef is the world's expert in designing and manufacturing high-speed ovens with almost 70 years' experience. The icon range delivers restaurant-quality food in queue-busting time. Great. But you don't know. You have to look up what this means. Anyway, I feel like, you know, I always start these talks and I get, like, the Merry Chef annoyed me. And you're all like, what's he talking about, Jim? So anyway, here I am. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Jim Seconde. Here are my socials. I work for Vonage as a developer advocate. Has anyone heard of Vonage? Couple of people, okay. Might have known us as Nexmo previously. We're a communications platform, so if you order a cab and the cab arrives and the cab driver is rubbish and can't find you, they press phone, and what's actually happening is that phone service is going through Vonage, presumably through the PHP SDK, which I mostly maintain. So here are my socials. Please, if you like this talk or you hate this talk, I don't care whether you like it or you hate it, as long as you put stuff on social media that mentions me so I can get to keep my job, because that's all that matters, really. Anyway, so I'm just going to get a brief outline about this, because you've looked at the title and you're like, CLIs aren't important, and what's he doing? And he's talking about coffee shops and the Merry Chef. So a bit of an outline. I'm going to talk about a little bit of background, and background is actually, it will look like it's not relevant, but it is. Some considerations to have when starting out designing a CLI, things that are bad and things that are good, and it's all sort of nicely balanced. And the standards and authoring on these things and maintainability. So to give a bit of background on CLIs, this is always sort of a crazy bit of fun when you look at sort of the evolution of things. We start off with, it goes back further than you think. This is actually a Fortran statement printed out on the IBM 80 punch card that went through an absolutely unbelievable mechanical machine. And that is actually 1928. So it's a bit like, when I was looking at it, I was like, really? And there are still people that use Fortran today, mostly for, I think, credit card clearance things, like financial transactions. And good news, you can make lots and lots of money. But I'm talking about Fortran, and this is PHP conference, so that makes no sense. This is a teletype model 33 from 1963. This is important because it starts taking commands, and also it's semi-electrical. And then we have really the start of the command line interface becoming something that you actively use. This is originally was actually running Multic, which became Unix, spelled like that, and then obviously it turns into the X, and that is in 1969. Oh dear. Oh, it came off. That's very typical of me. Just speak up, Jim. Oh. I was like a little massage. Oh, you want me to stay still? Oh man, this. So, control yourself, Jim. Right, so this is 1969. So this is the start of Unix forming command lines on the interface. And then we have competitors that are introduced. So then we have MS-DOS in 1981. Hopefully that brings misty-eyed fond memories of running really terribly bad graphics. DOS4GW, wasn't it? That was DOS games. And then Linux, really, the important bit for Linux is really the evolution of on top of Unix, because Linux then, Linus adds more and more commands, and then I've added FreeBSD because of Darwin, because of OSX's kind of heritage, but also FreeBSD is just after POSIX, and we'll get on to POSIX, which is the portable operating system interface. And so that's when we get into sort of standards of like, but how should this CLI actually look? What's a really fun fact is when you open up the terminal in a Mac or a Linux machine or PowerShell, it is actually an emulator that then has to emulate a physical serial port on your machine, and that is actually true, which I just thought was quite sort of a fun fact. Now, on top of CLIs, now we have language packagement starts becoming a thing. So we start off, Ruby actually pioneered it with Ruby gems, and then we've obviously got Pair, which probably everyone's used at some point, and then Composer, which is, thanks to the work of private packagists, is like, I know I'm biased, and we're at a PHP conference, but it is like the best one out of all of them, and we'll get onto the worst one, and you all know what it is. Maven and Gradle, just because they like to confuse people in Java. And then we've got Pip. Pip is okay. It does some weird stuff. I'll tell you what, virtual environments, every time, no idea what's going on. And then we have .NET, and then I said we were going to have the worst one, and the worst one is that. There is just no question about it. So these things, this is important for the background, because each of these has been individually designed for its own ecosystem. So this is kind of mentioned because the Vonage CLI 3 came out this year, and we had to design it from the ground up. We had to design a CLI, which is how this talk has come about, is, well, what do you do? It's like software engineering. There's no right and wrong way. It's like, yes, this is only a really simple site that displays some data, but we're going to use hexagonal architecture and things like that. And you're like, no. So we had to design it and make it intuitive, and the developer experience was really, really important. So the background part, the main talking points of this are, the thing is, all of these have been developed independently with no rules or universal standards. No one says, when you do Ruby gems, it should look like this, because there's no rules. They just go, well, let's sort of see what we do. They all happened in different independent environments with changing communications before the internet was invented, before accessibility was even talked about. So they have mistakes and flaws for reasons because they were beyond their control. And that's nobody's fault, it's just the way that the evolution happened. So if you're thinking about writing a command line, then it's time to look at how to actually do that, which is obviously what this talk is about. So considerations starting out. I know we're in a sort of world at the moment where diversity and inclusion are suddenly becoming hot topics for reasons that I shall not discuss today. But accessibility is there because you have the ability to make yourself a better engineer by just taking accessibility into consideration. And you want your users to just be able to use your thing. So why would you lock out people that have accessibility issues? There's no reason to do it. You're basically saying, I'm going to go out of my way to not have more users. So you do need to consider it. Why wouldn't you consider it? Self-documentation is essential, but this is the same with any sort of software engineering practice, really. You must have a strategy for flags and switches, and we'll get onto some really hilarious stuff later. And naming things is hard, and I sound like a senior software engineer, but it really, your language and is something that if you don't take into consideration, you'll start getting tech debt accrued down the line, and then you'll be like, oh no, nobody knows what this does because it's named really badly. And you have to have consistency across all commands, usually with something that is designed to do one thing and then ends up doing a million things with about 15 years of tech debt. That's where that consistency starts coming off the rails. So you have to consider these things, and we'll get onto the strategy. And like microservices, I cannot I cannot emphasize this as much. This is, so come on, Jim, right, stop, breathe. Like microservices, everything needs to be designed architecture first with CLIs. You think it's going to do a couple of things. If you make the wrong decisions, 5 years down the line, your CLI is going to be crap, and no one's going to like it. You have to do it, have that kind of microservices nightmare kind of, right, what happens if this infinitely scales? You've got to design it with that in mind first. And talking of bad things, no, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. I've gone one slide ahead in my mind. Accessibility considerations. So consider a screen reader. If you have a screen reader, if someone needs a screen reader, what does flag -F and -F do? Don't know. That's why we'll get onto long form switches and short form switches, but those things do different things. They shouldn't do different things, and we'll get onto that. But consider screen readers. Color blindness is really, really important because color blindness actually affects millions of people. And if you choose a shade of green that's really close to like gray, I found out I was colorblind from green to gray only about 2 years ago. I've never known it. I put on my jumper in the morning, and I was like, oh, I love my green jumper. And my wife's like, it's a grey jumper. It's not a grey jumper, it's a green jumper. And then hilarity ensued. Color blindness, so make sure that you choose proper contrasting colors. Future-proofing, the way with AI is the future and things like that. But honestly, things like OK Google and Alexa, we might get into a world where DevOps is triggered by voice, right? So that means you have to have your language and your verbs make sense. All information that is output out of your CLI needs to have configuration that makes it controllable. And likewise, the behavior of what it does should be controllable via configuration. All users should have that ability. This is the bit that's fun. So bad design traits. Let's just laugh at some stuff before we get onto the correct ways of designing stuff. So bad design. So an example like a bad design is this. Now, hands up if you know what this is. Nobody? Great. So this is a video game from 2008 called Limbo of the Lost, and it was in development for about 10 to 15 years. And the best thing is, it's absolutely awful. When they designed it, apart from the fact that it took so long to design, it was only out for a couple of months because everyone started noticing that they'd basically taken textures, level design, characters, all of Skyrim and Oblivion. They basically stole the entire game. There's even a video of the intro that's basically lifted directly out of the 1997 film Spawn. Like, they just lifted it, right? And then it turned out that the game engine that they used on it had, like, they were on the forums, and they couldn't even code properly. So they found these, and so they didn't do the code either. They did nothing. And everyone was like, this is like a stolen game. But that's not what this is just about, because apart from bad design, there's this bit, and you can find it on YouTube, and I want everyone to look at this when they get out, because it's brilliant, right? In the ending, this character here is the captain of as the captain of the ship, the Mary Rose, which is the Royal Navy ship from the 16th century. And what happens is, when he dies, he doesn't die, he goes into limbo, and the game is like a point-and-click, like LucasArts game, where he's like doing like this, and the animation's really, really bad. And when they didn't know how to end it, so when it ends, he walks into a room, and all the baddie characters that you see in the background are all there, and they all applaud him, and they're like, congratulations, you've won. And then this guy here, over there, he goes, ooh, that was great. Let's sing. And they all sing. They all sing a song about completing the game. It's on YouTube. Go and watch it. It's fucking mental. It's brilliant. Anyway, what was that? Bad design. This is bad design, right? So let's look at bad design and laugh at some bad design. Design nightmares, I call them. Cycling through the alphabet happens all the time. Don't do that. Why shouldn't you do that, Jim? Unix, ls. Look at ls, right? Look at it. Usage, ls. With no documentation, and you have to go, yeah, you can do it with the man page, sure, but if you just want that, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. Like, they've just gone through the alphabet and just cycled through everything. You actually acquire, I've kind of briefly alluded to this, but you acquire tech that as soon as the decision has been made. So all those letters of like, A does this, B does this, C does this. Right, well, what happens when the API underlying it kind of slightly changes? And then you're like, oh no, I'm stuck forever with this letter of the alphabet and I've cycled through them all. That's the reason why you acquire tech debt in that kind of way. Switches doing different things is madness, and I've got the examples because we're going to see them. And it's surprisingly, it's amazing how common this is, of switches doing the same thing depending on capitalization. So, number one, Git. Git branch, right? Git branch. Usage, Git branch, options, and then you've got this. -D, -D. Okay, same thing, right? No, no, it's not the same thing. Git branch my Elon branch because it's a rubbish branch and we don't want it. Dash D, what does that do? Delete fully merged branch. Okay, yeah, no, I'm on board with that. But now I'm going to do it with a capital D. Git branch my Elon branch, capital D. Same thing, right? No, delete branch even if not merged. That's totally different. That's a different thing. What I have in my head, and this is the example and the kind of the knowledge of imparting the talk, is how would you actually make this better rather than having just the same thing happen for two switches that are capitalized? Is, well, git branch RM within POSIX is a universal thing, my Elon branch. That deletes the fully merged branch. Fine. So what do we do for delete branch even if not merged? How about git branch remove my Elon branch dash F, and we know that force is a common POSIX thing to use. That's how these kind of things should work. I'm not blaming, like, I'm not going to pick a fight with Linus Torvalds because no one does or comes out alive. But, that's an example of better design management. That's one. Oh, I did not know until researching this talk what this was like, right? I've not really used it. I use the GUI for everything when it comes to Docker. Docker CLI is mad. It's just like, what? Docker run forward dash capital P my image. Yes, I'm happy with that. What does that do? Well, publish this image on any available ports you can find. Cool. So now I'm trying to fix things because I work for GitLab and everything is down all the time, and then there's a camera on my face showing everybody what I'm doing, trying to bug fix in real time. And I forget to put the capital P in. But Docker run P my image, that does the same thing. And the CLI goes, I don't know, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know what it means? Well, the thing is that means I want you to manually port map this. I want you to specify the port that you want to give me. Right, well, so how should it look? Oh, it looks like this. Right, so like completely different. What's this? To have, like, in each developer's brain, so what do you call it? When you automatically do something without thinking. When you do sort of touch typing, like, I can't think this morning. Not enough coffees. To have the automatic pilot. That means every developer now has to waste brain cycles thinking about slightly different things that are completely different. We're not done. We're not done. Is this the reigning champion? I mean, it could be. This is why short switches, you have to design them, right? So dash D. Hard delete equals true. Breakfast, plate 5. Yum, 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 yum. What does that do? Well, I'd expect it to do. Dash D looks to me like delete. So it should do an HTTP request like this. That's not what it does. It's not what it does at all. It does that. It does post. And you all probably have, lots of you have probably done curl requests where you just automatically, oh yeah, dash D for send data. It's sent, but it's not. It doesn't even start with D. It's send data. That's just like that makes no sense. And that's the one that originally I picked. And then I realized when writing the slides, I was like, Jim, you should pick the send data. And you realize, oh no, I've forgotten to leave out what I really should have done, which is this. What does that mean? What does that mean? Curl X. What it means is choose the HTTP verb. What? X? X isn't that? What's that? That's nonsense. This makes as much sense as a product from a couple of years ago. And the product was this. And everyone went out and bought it. And it was about, people were buying it on eBay for their children for £10. Why? Why were they buying this? This is nonsense. It's an energy drink that's flat and it's full of bad things for you. And it makes you, I don't know, luminous or something. No sense. But you thought that I'd finished and it was the worst example. And curl is not the worst, because the worst is this. Who knows what that stands for? Oh, there's a couple of people. It stands for uncomplicated firewall. And you know that's not true. That's not true, is it? It's just nonsense. This is what happens when your switches will break out of the asylum, dribble code all over the floor, and attack developers in a rampage of because it goes right. What does the documentation says? It says it's very smug as well. It's very clever. Like, oh, it's been developed to ease IP tables firewall configuration. UFW provides a user-friendly way to create an IP4 or 6. Okay. So what does it look like? I love the way that the organizers have heard me from outside and they're like, what is that guy doing? Okay, that's... What? Okay, we've started off with POSIX -- dry run. So everything else should be POSIX, right? No, rule, delete, insert number, prepend, allow. Now we have enums in there for some reason, mixed with other things. This is just absolute horror. And when you actually see it in practice, it looks like flowing prose. It looks like BDD. It looks like, you know, as a user, I wish to use the uncomplicated firewall environment with X, Y, Z. Make kebab case that. Don't kebab case that. This is where it goes wrong. Oh, that makes me sad. Right. Verbosity on your CLI. GrUSP, out of the box, we'll skip over the fact that automatic updates are on by default every time you run brew, which is a horror show. Why is it by default? macOS Homebrew is also verbose by default, which means I want to install ngrok. I do brew install ngrok. That should be simple, shouldn't it? And it goes, yes, here are all of the new casks. The new casks for what? Everything. I'm telling you, here are all the new casks. What are you going to do next then? Next, I'm going to update an unrelated Python thing for something that's completely unrelated for what you want to install. Why are you doing that? What are you going to do next? Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Windows update. I'm going to do, here is some advice about your shell that you didn't ask for. What do you mean by saying, well, yes, well, this cask is incompatible with your shell, and I'm telling you because I think you want to know that. Now I need to reticulate the splines, and now I need to pour this keg, but it is a read-only keg. I just wanted to install ngrok. What's this? What's this absolute nonsense? Verbosity by default. No, when you're designing your CLI, we'll get onto the correct way of doing this. No, please don't give me all of the information on the planet. I don't want it. So good, we've done the bad. And if I just concentrated on talking about bad stuff, it'd be like, yeah, all these things are really bad. That was a bit of a negative talk. Let's do the good stuff. So, good implementations. Configuration. You know, I mentioned earlier, everything needs to be configurable, right? So, you need the ability to import and export your CLI configuration, and that includes that's the verbosity. That is how much. That is the like color contrast, things like that. Anything that can switch the behavior or switch the information. Please use JSON or YAML. And the reason I say that is like, please don't use XML. I know XML is there for like PHP stan and PHP unit. Fine, but that's because that's the de facto of the time. You have no reason to use XML. I know I'm on a crusade because I hate XML, and if you want to see me really go mad, where I pretend to have a mental breakdown, go and watch my talk about APIs, and when I get onto SOAP, that's really fun. Overrides can now be used. So with this configuration, it means you can switch stuff at runtime. You're changing the behavior because in this instance, it is something like GitHub Actions or whatever, like running a pipeline. Consistency. All this really comes from POSIX, but all short-form switches have a long form, and please, it does the same thing. Please don't make it do something different. Dashes, this comes from POSIX. Dashes should be consistent with design patterns, so the design pattern I'm talking about there is POSIX. So short form, 1 dash, long form, 2 dashes. I know that comes second nature, but there are stuff out there where they don't do that. And that's just like, oh, that's a bit horrible. The concatenation happens only in short form. I've seen some really weird examples where they've tried to do something in long form. Don't do that, that's sadness. Mixing kebab case with camel or snake is a recipe for sadness. Let's talk about AWS. AWS CLI, EC2, describe instances, and I'm going to give 2 dashes. That is kebab case there, and then POSIX double dash. Cool, okay. But what comes back, because the CLI, because Amazon is a massive corporation with different teams doing different other things, is the API returning stuff is not consistent with the CLI. So you end up with this to reuse later, and you're like, yes, okay, now I'm going to take the JSON that came back and then pipe it into CLI input JSON, but now we have Pascal case. We have Pascal case mixed with kebab case. And so in your brain, your mental cycle's like, oh yeah, and what do I have to do the things for EC2? I have to do this, but then it's a different, some of this is kebab case and some of this is sausage case, I don't know. This is where sadness comes from, so make sure that everything is consistent and cross-collaboration with other teams to make sure that you don't make that, kind of run into that mistake. Consider each default, how much is it doing? There are some cases where a CLI does far too much stuff, and if it does far too much stuff, that means you can't really automate it, because that means there might be an installation that comes from a pipeline. If it's doing too much stuff, you need to break it out. Make command splits when there's too many switches. If you see a command and it looks like that, you have to refactor and start splitting out things and put them into their own commands. Otherwise, it becomes unmanageable. Watch your verbs. So, for instance, list instances versus get instances. If you start applying HTTP kind of protocol technology of stuff, you'll start confusing people if you try and use things too liberally. And interactivity. So, for instance, Laravel's a good example. When you have the starter templates, you do it in interactive mode. But that's because it makes sense. You don't really want to automate putting boilerplate code. Your GitHub Actions isn't going to do that. So that's fine. Whereas if there's something where it's like, do you want to be interactive with Composer is like, can be interactive. It does give you the option of whether you want to do it. But a machine is not going to do that because you're doing a Composer install. It's probably what happens if it's going to be on a microservice and it's doing a Lambda or something like that. Logging, so we have talked about verbosity. So it's the same thing, but I'm going to give you the design pattern of how this should work, and something that is really common with everything, and it's just wrong. Behavioral science, we have a thing in the UK called the nudge unit, which was laughed at in 2010, but actually became extremely successful. Nudging people is the ability to make decisions before them so that they can later go on to reverse that decision. The example that most people give is pensions. Pensions in the UK were not compulsory by default. You had to opt into a pension, which has resulted in a pension crisis where no young people have pensions. So they switched it up and said, by default, you have a pension, and now you contact your employer to say, I don't want a pension, right? So behavioral science, that's where this verbosity comes in. If someone wants verbosity, make them ask for it. Don't do a brew and say by default, because that's what you want to do. And logging and debugging, in my brain, are two different things. So this is how you implement them. You say, V is verbose. So that is one setting, which means I want more stuff. But -d, or something like --debug, that is a different setting, and that is I want all of the stuff. And I want all the stuff because I'm debugging it. These two things are different. Treat them differently, because when you don't treat them differently, you have it all under one flag, which is just verbosity, when you have this, an arbitrary -v, -vv, -vvv. What does -v mean? Well, it means I want more stuff. More stuff than what? What other stuff is there? Oh, right, you want to know exactly what logging commands are coming out. Well, in that case, now I've got to go and write a manual that specifies what comes under what different logging level, which is just, it's a waste. It's not a waste of time. You have to do it because it's documentation, but it doesn't, -v doesn't mean anything. You eliminate it by splitting out the definition of debug and the definition of I want some verbosity. Come on, clicker. Standards and authoring. When it comes to standards, there is only one gold standard, which is the aforementioned POSIX. If you want to look at how to actually design with POSIX, there is the CLI. Don't know what the G stands for, how to do it correctly. Maybe it's a dodgy flag, who knows? But that there, take that down, have a look at that. That is the correct way to do it. So when you're authoring, your package management footprint needs to be as small as possible. Remember, you're not doing a CLI that wants a lot of baggage that comes with it. So for instance, if I was going to do it in PHP, I'd choose something like Symfony Console. 9 dependencies. Or, for really cool stuff, don't tell anyone else in the conference I said this, but Golang. You have a flags standard library. That's 0 dependencies. Good. Or you could be suicidal and do that. But which is why everything is in that. Everything's in that. All CLIs are all in that. AWS CLI, and then if you want a framework, choose your fighter. Which one of the 9 million different CLI libraries do you want to use? And how many dependencies? It has left pad dependencies. Don't do your CLI in Node. I realize I'm pitching this talk to JavaScript conferences, so that's going to be fun. Watch out. So what I'm saying here is be careful about using frameworks, because it will ease and speed developments, but you also are inherently giving a core thing that you're designing as part of presumably your code and your software from your company. You're giving it a dependency. No. And the way to avoid this is commercial backing and cadence. Commercial backing, yes, it's a necessity. It's a necessity evil. It's a necessary evil. But it is important that there is backing, because it means that you won't run into like abandoned kind of situations. If you see this, for instance, that is a live thing when I was researching this talk. No, run. Is this repo dead? And if you're asking that question, the answer is yes, it is. On to more authoring. Cadence when you're designing it is key. If you want adoption for your CLI, if someone's asking, is it dead? Or someone is saying, oh, we could like use this CLI to automate this process, and they look, and the last commit was from 7 years ago, you get no adoption. It comes into Agile and everything else. Regular releases, quickly, small features, keep the cadence going. No regular releases, no releases at all, no adoption. No one will use it. No one wants abandoned stuff. I did a blog article recently, and it was on using CLIs to hydrate a webhook from Vonage and put it into a SQLite database, and it was in TypeScript. And I like the concept of TypeScript, but no. So CLIs, I tried to use it, and it wasn't doing it, and it was bringing stuff back in CommonJS instead of ESM, and I'm like, so this won't work. Why won't it work? And then I went on to GitHub. And it's a separate CLI CLI, which is a different package, and they just sort of abandoned it, and someone said, is this abandoned? And one of the authors said, yeah. Why haven't you told people it's abandoned? 3 days I took on that, and then I used Prisma ORM, which is like just as bad. It took me, I actually posted on this online, it took me about 5 days to write the article. I'm rewriting the article to do it in Laravel, and that took 45 minutes. So, open source citizenry, be good open source citizens. That means respond to questions, respond to issues quickly. It's not really the process of this talk, but if people start seeing this active stuff with your CLI, then they'll adopt it. If you don't use Semver, then I don't like you. Please use Semver. Please just use it, because CLIs will have runners, will have automated pipeline runners. If you don't do stuff in semantic versioning, if you don't know what it is, look it up. Then I will come round to your house and I will burgle you. I won't do that. That's not true. And the abbreviations. When Tim did the Merry Chef, what was he talking about? And yes, haha, I have come back to the Merry Chef. If you start arbitrarily adding abbreviations, and it's in your domain language about I work as a CPaaS. What does a CPaaS mean? Well, I can tell you, Vonage is a CPaaS. Well, what does that mean? Well, you should know, because I work at a CPaaS. You have no idea what a CPaaS is. It means Communications Platform as a Service. Oh, big, long thing. You don't know what that means, so I have to explain it to you. In your CLI, if you just start arbitrarily abbreviating things to do with what's happening under the hood, no one knows what it means. It's the Merry Chef isn't working. That means nothing. I think I should work for Merry Chef. I've mentioned it so many times. Right, last bit. Flags. Make sure there's consistent ordering. Help and version on every command. I mean, it seems obvious, doesn't it? But make sure that man is interchangeable if you want to use man for a manual. Dry run for everything that involves an actionable command. We've seen dry run previously in a terrible CLI thing from Docker, but it's really important that you have that. Document your import and export of configuration. Make sure that treat it like an API. If there's an error and the command is wrong, give them action back on what they need to do to fix it as best they can. Because there is stuff where it's just like, computer says no. Well, I don't know what's wrong. I'm trying to do this, and it's just like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Tell them what to do. It's not hard to do it, and it means people want to use your product more. Autocomplete. If you write autocompletion, you write scripts like bash scripts. It means that then someone in the community will probably come along for either JetBrains or VS Code and like write a module for it that will then do IntelliSense on it. So, and also really important, I don't want to be an A1 shill too much. If you want to know why I've written A1 instead of AI, look it up, type in politician A1. It's absolutely hilarious. If you don't want if you don't want to be left behind, yes, unfortunately AI is coming a bit, right? So if you have stuff that's documented the correct way, AI is going to pick it up, and people will be like, I am using Bob and Sarah's new CLI. How do I do this? It will have dredged and computed your documentation, and it gives them a shortcut to your documentation. So kind of think about that. I know we don't want to think about it in the same way that I want to pretend that blockchain doesn't exist, but I'm afraid it's kind of around, and we can't avoid it. Nothing's silent. If it does nothing because you've configured it wrong, and then you don't give the user feedback, they have no idea if your command has worked or not. So make sure, if nothing happens, do say to your user, I didn't do anything. Is that okay? And maybe that is good, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. And use cases in your docs. Write examples. This is like the dog fooding thing of you eat your own dog food. If you have trouble using your CLI, or your CLI is a bit tricky to implement, get use cases into that README and say, this is how you do this, this is that. And that's on top of the documentation within itself. There we go. What's the time been like? Oh man, I've done a good speed run. I was writing these slides, and I'm like, this talk is going to be like an hour long, and everyone's going to get bored. And now I've like run through it, and I'm like, I love coming in under time because I don't want to bore you all, and I talk a lot. If you want to come and speak to me afterwards, you'll have to tell me to stop speaking. Thank you very much.